Hello, team. This is Dr. Miranda. Again, it is a privilege to spend a few moments with you. The objective of this video is for us to go into the specific rubric sections for the Milestone 3 assignment this week. There are some really interesting dynamics that we are going to be studying this week, and there's going to be one of them on foreign trade zones. However, these are some of our objectives for this week is we're going to determine the effects of environmental policy on global trade. Now, there is some controversy when it comes to environmental policy. What does that really mean when we relate that with global trade? Well, we have to understand that the subject of business sustainability, conducting business in an environmentally safe way, in a ethical way, in a responsible way, in a productive way, in a positive way. These are some of the really big dynamics when it comes to businesses today, and that is expanding globally. For example, we love a nice, wonderful, steaming cup of coffee, right? But if you go to certain chains, for example, Starbucks, and other coffee chains, they will only buy their coffee beans from certain producers who are using wise agricultural techniques that do not harm the environment. They're using methodologies in growing their beans and harvesting that leaves a less carbon footprint on the environment as far as the production of that is concerned. They only buy beans from the growers who respect the workers, who provide a good wage for those workers, who do not exploit those workers, who do not use child labor or other unethical practices which are banned by most developed nations. And there's this growing global consciousness that we are responsible not only to make money as businesses, because that is the ultimate goal of a business. It is to make money. We're in it to make money. Without profits, there's no business. So let's not get into this nonsense that we're in it for a greater agenda. Okay? At the core of every business, whether it be an NGO, is the manufacturing of goods or the providing of services. Okay? And these services are either subsidized in terms of NGOs and whatnot by outside monies, okay, or the business is pretty much carried out in your classical supply and demand. I produce something or I give you a service and then you pay me for that. Okay, that's the very basic foundation of a business. Okay, so that's core. Profitability is still a major concern and it will always be. Okay, whether it's an NGO or your private companies. Profitability, the service or goods that we provide are still the core of every business. Okay. However, businesses can be transformative. Businesses can choose to be partners with the communities in which they are located. Okay. Businesses can choose to be transformative in the sense where not that they are paying for everything in the community. I mean, they're already providing goods and they're providing services, and that has a positive impact on the overall welfare of the community. Okay? But I'm talking about businesses coming behind schools, businesses who are providing certain goods and certain services, but also donations. They are working together with youth. They are working together with certain sectors of our society. They're working together to promote agendas. There are positive agendas that promote social welfare. I don't mean welfare in the classical sense of being on the dole. I'm talking about the welfare of the society, the overall good of the society, promoting good values, promoting things that will help the community expand in a positive way, in a meaningful way. Because When a community is healthy economically, they are healthy emotionally, healthy even spiritually, healthy, and has a organism that is whole. That is going to really promote a business-friendly environment, and there will be a beautiful relationship between businesses and the communities that they serve. So what I'm really excited about is the sustainability component of how businesses are done today. I'm excited about the green component as well. Although I am not a radical environmentalist, I do believe that businesses need to respect the environment. Businesses, global businesses, local businesses must conduct business in a way, their manufacturing, their service methodologies, how they deliver their goods. Are there ways that they can minimize carbon footprint? Is there a way they can minimize waste? Is there a way they can maximize a productivity without using as much resources? Okay. Is there a way to reinvent how resources are used? This is not radical environmentalist policy. This is not, not being friendly to businesses. Okay. Um, and so I'm really excited this week because we're going to discuss this in terms of international trade. Are companies, global companies who do business with each other, transnational companies, multinational companies, right? Have they become greener? Have they become more conscious of the environment? And are they willing to come together and accept certain deals that are transnational in scope, right? Now, there will always be a loser and there will always be a winner. Sometimes that is the inevitable things in life. There are no safe zones in life. There are no safe zones in business. Okay? There will be losers and there will be winners. But I believe that there's a way that you can have a win-win situation, a win situation for the business and a win situation for the environment. I think that we just need to have the willingness to come to the table and talk. And I think one of the greatest interesting that we have is I believe that was DuPont who made a tremendous shift in their thinking and were able to adopt some really forward-thinking strategies that, I mean, it really helped the profitability of their company and the way that people were perceiving the company. Um, but there will be pain in the process because some businesses are not willing to go that far. Some will even think that, well, this is a grab by the UN or Big Brother or the world nations are trying to keep us from making money and trying to implement a globalized agenda on the backs of American and European businesses. It has nothing to do with that because at the end of the day, when global businesses adopt certain methodologies that are good for the environment, they're good for the planet, they're good for life, right? They will not only benefit the environment, they will not only become more sustainable, but oh, dear heavens, they will have increased market shares because people today are willing to subsidize, they're willing to do business with companies that are conscious of the environment, conscious of the social conditions around us. And you will see that this is the platform going forward. There's no regressing back to the past. I believe that we must embrace the dynamics that we have in the current market and move forward to, I believe, a better future for our businesses as well as our communities. Also, we're going to investigate the regional and multilateral arrangements. These are very important and somewhat controversial. Again, there is the political component to the world trade, to international trade. We can never separate that from international trade, but that's why it's going to be important for you to do your heavy lifting in terms of research this week and investigate regional and the multilateral arrangements that have, I believe, led to some really, really great global deals. Others not so good, right? But we're all a work in progress, including our trade deals. Okay, and of course, we're going to examine the competitiveness among global countries. There's competition, and let me tell you, it's getting harsher. Competition is getting even more fiercer than before. There are certain dynamics that really have, I think, leveled the playing field to some extent. And one of them is the internet. For example, I am opening in a process of opening a publishing company. Now, this publishing company will first operate here in the States, okay? But I'm already talking with other individuals because we want to take the concept global, okay? It's a new way of publishing materials and do it in a way that's environmentally safe, environmentally sound, but at the same way, it is something that it's going to go global. That is the end result of this. Okay. Now, what am I doing? I'm doing my homework, right? I'm looking right now, okay, my competitive, my competitors, not just in the local level, but I'm looking at my global competitors. I'm looking how they conduct business. I'm examining the ins and outs of the business in a global context. There are certain markets that I want to penetrate, and first it's going to be Brazil, and then the surrounding Hispanic countries around Brazil, making those contacts. But I'm taking my time, not rushing. You know, fools rush in where angels fear to tread, right? Well, I don't want to rush into something. But that's why I'm doing my homework. That's why I'm doing my research, doing my due diligence, so I can better understand the market on which I want my company to operate, and hopefully it will be a global concern. Okay, so we'll have an opportunity to look at how competition is really, really very heavy, and it is being driven mostly by the internet. And that has created, again, a level field for many companies like mine who don't have much capital, but we want to break into a market that's been dominated by the big boys for many, many decades, and we can act as a disrupting force. Again, we're looking at the competition. We're looking how things operate in the market, particularly the one which you have selected. Now, we're going to go to the rubric itself. I'm going to break down those components, and I'm going to ask you, as you sit down to write this particular milestone, I want you to take some time, go over the rubric, go over step by step, invest the time with these videos. I try to make them as short as possible, but I do believe that it's an investment. It's an investment on my part, but it's an investment on your part as well. I want you to look at the components because sometimes, because we're humans and because we make mistakes and because our schedules could be rushed, we have a tendency of missing certain sectors of a rubric, and that, of course, has a negative impact on the performance. So what I would counsel you, take a look at these videos and make sure, even after you have gone step by step, use the rubric as a checklist when you are writing your paper, and pretty much make sometimes even a mental, okay, or a physical note, check mark. Hey, this is already check. I've already done that. So without any further ado, let's go into the rubric, and this means we're going to shift screens. Excuse me. I'm going to take out myself, and I'm replacing that with a screenshot. Now, you may not be able to see it as well, and I will move the screen back and forth, okay? But I'm still leveraging the technology as far as the written screenshots is concerned, okay? And eventually we will get there where we'll have very sharp graphs to look at. But now we look at the milestone 3. It says you will analyze and describe trade agreements in foreign trade zones. Okay, so you're going to look at foreign trade zones. You're going to look and see what is a foreign trade zone. There are many resources you can look at which will define for you a foreign trade zone. Do not confuse a foreign trade zone with a foreign market. They are very different, okay? Now, there are some beautiful resources you can use for that, okay? And one of them is actually from our own government, okay? Let me make sure that I have pulled that up and, okay? Again, you can Google, you can look, what is a foreign trade zone? It'll give you the short definitions of it, right? But you can also dig a little bit deeper, right? For example, in the United States, how are foreign trade zones treated, right? What kind of businesses can happen in the foreign trade zones? For example, when I was a kid, when our folks were leaving the United States of America, returning to Brazil, or they were visiting family members, often we will go to the duty-free zone in the airport, and my parents will buy cigarettes and liquor in high quantities, because there was always the benefit of that, the very cheaper prices in terms of taxation issues were concerned, duty free. So that is an interesting concept for you to look at, but I want you to really dig down and talk about the foreign trade zones. And so these are some of the resources that you can look at. Okay, again, Wikipedia is not a peer-reviewed source, is not an academic source that you would use for a formal paper like this. Okay, but Wikipedia, it's good to give you a flavor. Okay, so of the subject, and so you can then use other resources. For example, the Shapiro Library. You can get some beautiful articles, peer-reviewed academic sources where you can get information that you can quote from, but also government sources are peer-reviewed, considered peer-reviewed. So if you want to use, let's say, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, because you're talking about the U.S., then you can quote, from this information. But I want you to become very, very adept at conducting this type of research. Okay, so you're going to find some beautiful information, good information about the concept of foreign trade zones, and in this case, how foreign trade zones operate within the United States of America. Okay. Now we're going to go back to the rubric. Okay, so you will analyze and describe trade agreements in foreign trade zones. Indicate which ones will be more beneficial for your company and for your industry. Again, you're working with the company you selected and the industry you selected. We're going to keep it all the same. Okay. The next step is a detailed analysis of competitors in your chosen global market and industry. And it says here, use specific examples. This is very important. Be very detailed. Now, we don't want an Encyclopedia Britannica, right? But we want substantive information, substantial information that's very detailed. And the more detailed you are, the better your paper is going to be. Okay, so section 5, we're going to be looking at trade agreements and foreign trade zones. A, describe your country's specific trade agreements and applicable foreign trade zones. So you're going to describe the country you selected, not the United States, okay, but the country you selected for your business to conduct its business and to be located, your offshore business. So let's say you chose Switzerland. You're going to talk about Switzerland's specific trade agreements, okay? Um, and the applicable foreign trade zones in Switzerland. If it's Switzerland you chose, that's going to be the country, not the United States, but the country, the foreign country where your business is being carried out now. Okay. B, evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of the trade agreements on the specific international market. Okay. You're going to talk in detail the advantage and disadvantages, okay, of those trade agreements, okay, and the advantages and disadvantages to that specific international market, right? So if you're talking about Switzerland and your company is Nestle or other chocolate company, right? You're going to talk about, okay, well, what are Switzerland's specific trade agreements, right? And what are the disadvantages and or advantages that this trade agreement gives to that specific international market? Now, then what we're going to do is what is their impact on the industry in which your country operates? Okay, so you start on the market, right? Switzerland, and then what is the impact of those trade agreements, okay, and foreign trade zones, right? But the first one here is your trade agreement, right? Advantages and disadvantages of the trade agreements on the specific international market. Address this, please. Then, after you address this, what is their impact on the industry in which your company operates? Then, after you're talking about, after you finish speaking of the trade agreements, advantages and disadvantages of the trade agreements, then you're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the foreign trade zones on that specific international market, okay? And then what is their impact on the industry in which your company operates? So two things you're going to be talking about, right? The advantage in this, first, you're going to describe the country-specific trade agreements and applicable foreign trade zones, right? You're going to discuss this. You're going to describe it. And then you're going to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of those trade agreements on your international market, okay? And then you're going to talk about what is the impact on the specific industry that you have chosen, okay? So that is trade agreements. Then you're going to do the same thing for the foreign trade zones, right? Okay, now we're going to talk about competitiveness, okay? And that is, of course, section 6. Evaluate the overall competitiveness of your specific market based on the World Competitiveness Yearbook. Okay. For example, how attractive is this market to foreign direct investment? Support your response with evidence. So please go into the World Competitiveness Yearbook. Please go into it. Retrieve the information that's applicable to your specific market. Okay, and defend your response with that evidence from the World Competitiveness Yearbook. Okay, and please quote that. And make sure you have an in-text citation and you have a APA reference. Okay. B, you're going to evaluate the overall competitiveness of your industry in the specific market based on the World Competitiveness Yearbook. For example, the produce industry in Chile has restrictive accessibility and therefore a low competitiveness. Support your response with evidence. Okay. Now, the guidelines for the submission are very important because of this. Sometimes in business, you only have one opportunity to make a good impression. Only one. Okay? Whether that's appearance, whether that's verbal communication, whether that's written. I remember many years ago, I was doing operational risk management, Citigroup, and one of the directors, we were talking, and I gave him a set of reports. He came back to me. He says, the information is good. It's good information, but you got to make it pretty. I love, he said, you make it pretty. And what I got from that is the presentation of that information that I had presented. See, he was going to present that to global senior members of Citigroup. Therefore, he wanted to make sure there were no mistakes with the numbers, there were no mistakes with formatting, there were no mistakes, no misspellings, no grammar issues whatsoever. Because we were dealing with the top leadership of the bank, global leadership. He told me, Yubi, the information is good. He said, but they will never get past the mistakes. They will never get past the misspellings. They will never get past the ugly formatting. Now, I know this is hard to take. For me, I was like, what do you mean? Right? So from that point on, I understood what he was teaching me. And from that point on, my reports, they look like a work of art. Okay? And I honed the ability in those reports to get their eyes exactly where I wanted those eyes to be at. And you can do that with formatting, you can do that with colors, you can do that with different fonts and whatnot. Same thing here with your grammar, same thing with the spelling, same thing here with the APA format, style formatting, paper formatting. Same thing. There's no difference whatsoever, none. Okay? Because here's the thing. If my eyes cannot get past the misspellings and the grammars and the format issues and citation issues and reference issues, it really distracts from the overall information being presented in the paper. Okay? Now, we are creatures of habit. All of us. We all have habits, some good and some bad, right? And if we do this type of work for school, more than likely we will repeat that at work, right? Now, we're all professionals. We're all professionals, all of us. So that's why I want to pass on this little tidbit, right? Let's make sure that you have the best shot in your projects at a school and at work. In going through this process of rubrics in terms of the guidelines for submission, the APA, right? The font requirements. None of this is in vain because you will get to use it. You eventually become very proficient. And when you become proficient in one area, it usually bleeds through other areas. So I really want to encourage you to really follow the guidelines for the submission, okay? And the guidelines are very clear, okay? And do remember that there is a point component to this, okay? And you can have the best paper on the planet, the best information, but that deserves an A, 100. But if this particular area here, the guidelines for submission are not followed, unfortunately, there will be losses, right? And we don't want that. So the guidelines for submission is Milestone 2 must be submitted as a 2 to 3 page. This doesn't include the title and reference pages. And please, the rubric does call for a APA cover page, okay? It has to be Microsoft Word document with double spacing. I know that on Blackboard it can be very confusing because on Blackboard it says you can submit a PDF document, okay? But I want you to go with what the rubric is saying, okay? Because again, having a Microsoft Word document, it's good for me and it's good for you. specifically when it comes to grading, okay, where I'm able to do a whole lot more with a Microsoft Word document in terms of providing deeper and better feedback, okay, using the tracking uh, situation or tool. Okay, it has to be double spacing, 12-point Times Roman font, and 1-inch margins. Okay, include charts in an appendix. Included should be at least 3 scholarly references, 3 minimum. All references should be cited in APA format. Okay, now I want to teach you something in terms of how to leverage the rubric even more. Okay, for example, look here. The critical elements that I'm going to be grading is here. Trade agreements and foreign trade zones, describe. Trade agreements and foreign trade zones, agreements. Trade agreements and foreign trade zones, zones. Competitiveness, specific market. Now, if you look over here, let's say trade agreements and foreign trade, okay? There's a value of 18 points. That means if you meet this here, proficient, that you describe country-specific trade agreements and applicable foreign trade zones. If you've done that and you have your APA citation to back that up, okay? If you use the proficient scale, has your rule, has, where you want to shoot this at, to go towards that, then you will gain the 18 points, okay? But what happens if this element is not in your paper? You lose the 18 points, okay? And what happens if this is not on you lose the 18 points, right? For example, the APA and all of those particular grammar and spelling and whatnot, they're a part of the articulation of response section, okay? If you only have few spelling issues and a few citations issues, right? I mean, the citations are there, but maybe they're not in the right format, okay? And everything looks good, right? You get the whole 10 points. But if you are missing citations, in-text citations, okay, then this becomes not evident, okay? That means the entire 10 points are lost. So that's how you leverage the rubric, okay? You look at these specific sections and you make sure that you are adhering, right? For me, I would shoot for proficient all the time, right? And I will make sure that everything that is being asked here, it's delivered, okay? Sometimes I have found, for example, that the rubric material, okay, on a grading scale tends to be more granular down here than sometimes up here, okay? This is good guide. This will help you see what it's being asked, okay? It's being very detailed here, but if you want to break it down even more, okay, you look here, okay? And this is a way that you can leverage the rubric for your own benefit, okay? So we now have come to the end of our video. Hey, look, it's interesting. Look at that. Okay, and I'm going to come back here, and it takes a lot of computing power for the computer to do that, and it'll carry on until eventually the computer will come to a halt because there's no more processing power available, right? Those of you in technology, you will enjoy that. All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your dedication. If you have any questions, any concerns, any areas that perhaps is not clear, I want you to please contact me at the available contact information. You can email or you can call. You don't need a schedule to call. Just pick up the phone, call me. The phone is available on the school's instructor information there on the blackboard. Just call If I can get the call, I will. If I can't, I will still pick up the phone and we will arrange for a better time.